Okay, so just to introduce, Oliver Holmes, as his slide says, better known as Ollie to his friends and colleagues.
Indeed.
And I'm going to let Ollie talk about their usage of MEDIAL at London Metropolitan, where we are today. So I'll let you take it away, Ollie.
Thank you very much. I feel like I've been on stage already because I seem to always be in the MEDIAL demo videos and obviously the dry run video. So anyway, yeah, I'm Olly Holmes, as Rob said. I'm Deputy Director of Technology and Operations here at London Met. So welcome to London Met, both people that are here and the people that are kind of watching remotely. So today I was just going to talk a little bit about who London Met are, seeing as we've got you here. It seemed like a good promo opportunity, and marketing kind of insists that we do that. And then tell you a little bit about what we're doing here, generally in terms of learning and teaching and the technology, but also obviously talking more about MEDIAL. How we use that in maybe slightly different ways to other people, although actually we'll probably find that it's very similar. And then plans for the future, and obviously a quick plug for some things that we'd like to see in the product. And then some time for questions. I talk quite a lot normally, so I'm also very aware that lunch is directly after me. So if people start throwing things at me, I know to get off and that it's time for food, but I'll try not to overrun too much. So who are London Met? Well, we've actually been around quite a long time in terms of lots of different organisations, but we are a relatively new university in that category. And London Met is the result of a merger between London Guildhall University and University of North London. That's quite a while ago now, but there are still some people that hang on to those legacy institutions. We're a very diverse organisation as well. We have a widening participation remit, and one of the stats that I found on our marketing page that I've moved into this slide is we're 9th out of all the universities in the UK, USA, Australia and New Zealand for diversity. What that really means is that our student population is not necessarily the same as other universities that we've got in the audience here or that might be watching. We have people very much from all walks of life, mostly non-traditional people that haven't gone through school, FE, and then straight into university. We have lots of people that are the first in their family to come to university, that are coming and studying part-time or in the evenings, or have international students that have come and joined us as well. So we find technology challenges and actually making sure that we can engage with those students, and it's not necessarily the most straightforward populace to engage with. But we're doing quite well. We've been voted Best Millennial Institution in the UK, and also we've got good graduate employment as well. So that's something that we want to kind of build on. In the university at the moment, we have two major programs that we're working through. One is called Pizzo, which stands for Programme for Improving Student Outcomes. And this is very much a focus on making sure that the student experience is at the forefront of what we do. And I'm sure that everyone else that's from a university, this resonates with them, and they're doing similar programs as well. And this is involving students and the student body with us in how we actually teach them and the quality of the teaching and delivery that they get. So this is something that we're really focusing on. This works really nicely with the other program that we're doing, which is One Campus, One Community. So we're here today in Holloway. We also have campuses in Moorgate and Aldgate, but what we're doing is we're bringing all of the university onto this site. We're spending around 125 million, actually it's more than that now, in creating this campus and actually renovating it, doing lots of refurbishments. We've got some building programs as well in terms of putting extra floors on buildings and moving some stuff around. And it's really nice to actually invest in the environment for students, but also use that opportunity to invest in the technology that we have and the resources that we have to teach those students as well, and create a better environment for them and help that community for the students. So that's really nice for us. We have one of our first parts of that, which is our C-Block Learning and Teaching building coming on stream in the next couple of months. So we've been quite busy in terms of putting new technology in there and actually really looking at the way that we teach students and provide content to them. How do we do that? Well, probably in common with everyone else here, we look outside of ourselves and we talk to colleagues in terms of the Learning and Teaching Spaces Managers Group, SCOMS. We go out to all of the trade shows, off to ISE and BET, and go and find all the cool technology, and we participate in news groups and things like this and steal ideas from other people, which is what I guess lots of other people do as well. So that's great. And we work internally as well, and something that we've been doing lots of is, as part of Pizzo, working with the students and actually understanding what they've experienced, both through school, FE, out there in the wider world, what they've brought from their offices, what they've experienced, and also with lecturers who are obviously the professionals in their subject and know what's happening in their practice. We've worked very hard to standardise technology as well. So at the moment, we have about 300 classrooms. They're standardised, and we actually work in monitoring those remotely and actually having core technology that we can actually make sure that lecturers walk into a room, know what they're doing, and students get that standard experience. I'll talk a little bit more about maybe some of that technology. If people are interested a bit later, you can ask me questions and we'll say why we've picked certain things. It's rather specific, I think, on my slide that we talk about biodynamic microphones, but I can talk about why that. So last year, so 2016, we actually mandated lecture recording. So I think we were a bit slow, a bit far behind other people in terms of doing lecture recording, but we struggled as a university in working out how we were going to do that, not really from a technology perspective, but actually engaging lecturers. We had probably similar things that people might have had elsewhere. Lecturers worried about their intellectual property and students engaging or maybe not coming to the lectures and things like that. We started the program last year, and it's revolutionised what we do in terms of streaming. So in the next slide, I'll talk really about our journey with streaming in the university. But we've gone from very little streaming media and very little engagement in terms of our streaming technology to a massive increase. So we use TechSmith Relay in the university, so the big red button on the desktop for people to press and actually record and capture those lectures. We made a very conscious decision to go in fairly gently in terms of the technology, not Panopto or anything else, so that we can actually scale that up. And we found that what people want is slides, they want to see the desktop, and they want to hear good quality audio, so that that's something they can follow through on when they're on the tube, when they're on the bus, when they're actually kind of listening to it back. Rob talked a little bit about the new player in version 5. We're using version 5. We're also Linda users. So having that speed option is something that's really good and really useful for our students as well. So we've really ramped up, and we've gone up to about 5,000 views a month, 400 uploads a month as well. And we're peaking at around 90 uploads a day at the moment. So we're going in, we started with, I've got a colleague in the audience, Mike, who's been working on this for us. Mike, did we just start with one level last year? It wasn't the whole cohort, was it? It's going up a level each year. So we're not trying to capture every lecture at the moment. We're phasing this in, but you can see that it's already had a massive impact in terms of the content that we're actually pulling in and how that's being used, which is really good. It's not just content going in, the blue line, it's the views, the orange line that we really want to see, which are growing exponentially. So we've had streaming media in the university for over 10 years. I couldn't believe it. I kind of went back, checked the records. And it was very traditional. We had a real media server. We also had a Windows media server. And they've sat there and really not been used. Just a bit of the infrastructure that almost has a bit of dust on it, not doing very much at all. Obviously, we've kind of moved formats throughout the years. Reel dropped off very quickly. And I think that some of that low take-up is we didn't really have the content, the workflow around it, so no one was really capturing content or anything else. You had competing technologies and a lack of playback facilities, so it very much required plugins in browsers or different browsers to work. And I think that now, not only do we have content and a workflow that makes sense in terms of lecture recording, we're also using that for all sorts of other marketing and promotional materials. I think it's really hit the mainstream in not requiring plugins, in having HTML5 natively in browsers, in people having mobile devices to consume this content as they're moving around. I think that the blended learning element and certainly the streaming element of video has really found its time, and we're really experiencing that, and it's exploded in the university. We use streaming for other things as well, so not just lecture recording. So we have specialist teaching facilities. So we have a mock courtroom, which we've just invested some money in terms of adding additional cameras in there and audio, giving users actually the ability from an iPad to control that, to control screen layouts and picture-in-picture, to have the witness bench, to have the defendant, to have the judge. It's something that's a requirement from their Law Society accreditation to record some of the mock courtroom activities that they do, the mooting and things like that. But this has just taken it to the next level, and it's something that they really love. We have just over the road a super lab as well, large science lab, which has got 268 student benches. We've just completed a £500,000 AV renovation in that space. using an AV over IP technology by Wirestorm, which allows us to deliver 4K video from bench to bench, and that's a 1-to-all or 1-to-1 or 1 to any combination of those. And that's something that's really great from a learning and teaching perspective, but we also sit in that workflow Extron SMP boxes, which we take the output from those and feed that into MEDIAL and actually consume that. We archive that there so that we can also keep the lecture recording going through that mechanism and rebroadcast those out. Added value. So anyone from the university, we've grown at this point. This is my big thing, but I'm part of the green team in the university, and we do lots of sustainability work. As a reward for that, we got some money given to us a couple of years ago, and we invested that back in putting some bees up on the roof. So this is actually up there at the moment. That is a live feed right now, so it looks quite nice out there. It's not snowing today. And what we're doing is we're taking RTSP feeds from IP cameras around the university. So we have bee cams, we have a couple of those. We have a duck cam because we have a little pond in the inner courtyard where we have little ducklings that hatch every year and wander around the university, which is quite cute. And that number decreases throughout the year. Falcon cam has an asterisk because we have falcons up in the tower, but when they're up there, we can't put cameras up there, so that's about to go up there. And as I say, we're doing building work at the moment, so we found that actually having the IP cameras really helps to train that on the external works that are happening with the construction and actually engage people in what's happening. And we push this around the university in digital signage and also through MEDIAL and the media library. And we're taking the student radio station as well, and we're rebroadcasting that through MEDIAL as well, which means that we can then archive that student radio and help them get out to a wider audience. So we're not done. When we implemented TechSmith Relay and suddenly had all of these lectures running, we realized that we might hit a bit of a bottleneck, 90 recordings a day, that's an hour of recording, kind of 2 hours of transcoding. So transcoding was running at about 1 times for us, which was not great. So we were building up great big queues. So we added an additional transcoder from the TechSmith side. We added an additional transcoder from the MEDIAL side and managed to bring it down to something that was reasonable, but was still building up huge queues. That's when we worked with MEDIAL and actually did a kind of copy through on the HD. We were on version 4 at the time. Now with version 5, as Rob said, that's something that you can do in the product natively, which is great. And we've actually just purchased, so is Georgina still here? We've just purchased Media Lecture. This week, I think we actually got it. So that's something that we're looking at moving to. I think the demonstration that Rob did earlier is just so compelling. The fact that you press stop and it's there is, fantastic and will make a huge difference from student expectation, from lecturer expectation, and again, to keep that engagement up in the views. I think when someone walks out of a lecture and wants to go back and look at it, but it's not there maybe for a couple of hours or maybe even a day, depending on where they're at in an encode cycle, they go off the boil, they're not necessarily going to go back and look at it. We do embed it in Blackboard, so they'll go back and they'll look at it in those materials, but I think the fact that we can make it available immediately and also bring some of those other tool sets into there, so annotation, is very useful. And we were doing a workaround with TechSmith for, again, for our law students in terms of recording webcams. TechSmith doesn't natively take just a full screen webcam, it just does a picture-in-picture. MEDIAL Lecture lets you take a full screen webcam and record that as video. So it's a very quick way of getting feedback back in as well without just having a screencast. Improved reporting, one of our bugbears is that the reporting from MEDIAL at the moment is a little weak. So whilst we know that we're improving, we're getting loads more videos in there, we're getting loads more views. I think if we can turn that around and actually present that back to the university, back to lecturers, we're giving a lot of dashboards to lecturers around student engagement to actually include things like viewing figures as well would be really useful and actually see which lectures are good and getting engagement and which ones really aren't. That will also help us with archival and retention. So something at the moment that we're building up, a much, much bigger library. So we have over 6,000 clips in our library at the moment. Do we need them all? At what point do we pull some of those out? These are questions that we're struggling with at the moment. And it's a bit of a kind of gross thing at the moment to just look at what hasn't been viewed or what's been up there for a long time. So So I think some more sophistication around that and some more automation around that as well is something that would be really welcome. It was great to see Ryan's presentation on 360 and augmented reality, something that we have some aspirations with. So the Super Lab that we've just renovated, I'll show you in a sec, we've done a 360 video for that. We can definitely see a use case in terms of open days and actually showing off facilities. But I think as well, the Super Bowl example was great. I mean, I can definitely see people sat in a lecture and seeing that engagement, or in fact, a seminar possibly more than the didactic lecture. We're doing much more in terms of active learning and the engagement. And I think rather than just looking forward and having a camera pointed up at the screen, being able to actually see what else is going on in that room and participating is something that will really engage students and keep them engaged. Performance tuning, so Dave helps us every now and then. We give him a call or drop him an email and say that pages aren't responding quite as quickly or videos aren't playing. We want to absolutely squeeze the last drop of performance out of the hardware that we've got. This is one of the few physical boxes that we have at the moment. And we'll be looking at maybe using the cloud to take some of that transcoding burden and move that away from physical. And disaster recovery and resilience, I wondered whether I should put the Dilbert cartoon in there, but our disaster recovery plan doesn't quite go something like this, help, help, but it's not far off it actually when it comes to the lecture recording. We started off, as I say, very much as a kind of pilot and moving into it. Actually, it's now something that the students really rely on. It's something that's exceptionally important, and I don't think that we've put that as high up our disaster recovery plans and business continuity as we should do. So that's something very much that we really need to focus on. And I'd welcome, people, the next section is kind of questions for me, but I'd welcome, people telling me how they've kind of dealt with some of that archival of materials, where they've put that, how they're dealing with some of those things as well. So this was just to show off our 360 video, to show that, there are real life situations. Thankfully, we've got no audio, because otherwise you'll hear me talking again. I think we've had enough of that. But this is actually what this building looks like. And part of the reason that we've done a 360 is the scale of it, the size of it, you don't get until you go there. There's me. I'm not really there. But you can see it's a lovely space. It's a really cool space to work in. The students love this as well. And this is a great way of showing it off. I've seen some goggles around, VR goggles and cardboard, and when you actually get people to watch these videos in an immersive way, they get a wow moment, and we quite like to give people wow moments. So that's me. Any questions?
Actually, I would like to ask some questions, if I can.
Go for it.
And also address maybe some of the stuff that you spoke about on the slide there as well. Is my audio okay on this lapel mic? It's good, okay. So questions that I've got, I mean, when I've come in here, Ollie, we've obviously seen this...
Sorry, the red one.
The red mic, okay, cool. So the red mic for me, John? Yeah, okay. So when we've come in here, we've got the TechSmith Relay instructions here.
Indeed.
So because it's always of interest to me how people actually use this stuff. So what is the actual work, what is the process of teacher comes in here, John, whoever set up this room, what happens to that? What happens in practice? I mean,
so I have to be really careful, because I'm looking out into the audience and I have the people that actually make this happen, rather than me who gets to stand here and talk about it. Yeah. So what's really great, and what we really wanted to achieve, was that we don't have to train everybody, because obviously that doesn't work. We want something that's going to be fairly intuitive. Having said that, we have a department. John, what's your department called? CPED, Centre for Professional Education and Development? Absolutely. Perfect, I remembered something. Who are basically teach the teachers, train the teachers, and who will give best practice and give support. And we have some videos that sit obviously within our media library for people to look at and learn how to do that. But we have instructions that sit on each podium, and effectively there's a big red button. I don't know, how many people use TechSmith? Okay, a couple of people, not just us. Has everyone else seen it? I mean, it is the most user-friendly interface ever. There's a big red button. You can actually ignore signing in. You can just press record and off you go. So we've spent a lot of time working out actually how do we make rooms user-friendly so that we don't have to have microphones that get issued or wireless mics that are going to get lost or batteries run out. So we have, in retrofitted rooms, we have USB mics that sit, boundary mics that sit on lecterns. And on our newer installs, we have the biodynamic Revoluto microphones, which we found to be exceptionally good at creating corridors, basically, for us of audio. And we very much focus that on a teaching element so that we get that audio through.
So that sort of audio, like we're using mics, room mics, but you're talking about the kind of mics that would pick up questions from the audience or questions from students, or so when you're talking about the kind of the corridors, what's the use case for that?
So the Revoluto mic is it will create a corridor pickup pattern.
Yeah.
So it's concentrated for the lecturer. So basically, if everyone down there is having a bit of a natter, we're not going to pick that up. We get decent audio from the lecturer. However, if the lecturer shuts up, and that's what we're picking up from there, we find that the audience pickup is then really, really good.
Yeah.
We're looking at some other options as well. So Nareva have a product called the HDL 300 or something like that, which does a microphone mist, so creates virtual microphones in the room. So we're trying to push that forward and really find the right audio solution, because as I said before, what students want is not a video of a lecturer stood up here, not a video of a PowerPoint going on in the background. They maybe want the slides, but actually they can normally get that because that's been uploaded as a PowerPoint. They want to hear back the audio, and they want to hear that, certainly in London, against the context of being on a bus or on a tube or a train and travelling around. So that's really important to them.
So the workflow for the TechSmith thing is teacher, lecturer comes in, presses big red button.
Yep.
After the event, archive to MEDIAL, goes...
So as you said before, presses the big red button, sends it up to TechSmith.
Yeah.
TechSmith then actually does its encoding. So we've got an extra step in there at the moment. That then goes across to MEDIAL. Actually, because we're now skipping the encoding on the MEDIAL side, that's then available very quickly in MEDIAL at that point. But actually moving to MEDIAL lecture means that we won't get that first encoding bit, and I get to cut some of my licensing in terms of having TechSmith, which is very important to me.
Yeah, I mean, but then it goes into a bucket or it goes into their personal category? So is it kind of divvied out in any way in terms of categories, or is it just going...
So it goes into their personal category.
Yeah.
So interestingly, from a student perspective, we don't send them to the MEDIAL interface.
No.
Because we don't want students going off to lots of different areas, what we do is they engage with that through Blackboard. So the lecturer will then make that content available to them in the right place with their lecture notes, with any group discussions or anything else that's happening within Blackboard.
That's the typical use case. So yeah, that's pretty much as we would see. Okay. So to address some of the questions that you had on the slide, go back, where are we? The reporting I'm going to show in V6, so hopefully there'll be gasps of joy at that one. The archive and retention is a really, it's an interesting area, and it's tricky to kind of nail down exactly what people want with that, because I've seen a lot of kind of requirements to archive this stuff for a certain period after students leave, or there's a lot of kind of noise, but there's not a lot of concise, accurate information. It seems like everyone's got a different policy. I've been to some customers where they said, we have people come back to us 5 years later and say, I used this thing in my coursework. I'm now applying for jobs. I want to showcase this, and you've got to give it to me because I paid whatever per year to come to the uni. So it's a tricky one, that. I think you'd get a lot more out of the reporting knowing the things that aren't viewed, because we've got a lot of data there where you can see engagement, like you said. The 360 stuff, really, I think it's down to demand. I haven't seen, when we've shown 360, and we did last year, Ryan did a great presentation on 360 last year, there's demand, but I think it's still fairly niche. The player that we use, the JW player, does an okay job of the 360 stuff, but I think, Ryan's talked to me about sort of other solutions that are out there for doing that, and it's
Is the new player on the roadmap? Because the new JW player natively supports it. It may not
Yeah.
be as feature-rich, but that
So
would be really helpful.
it's there. So JW Player 8 we're going to have in version 6 of MEDIAL. And the performance tuning, this was something that I went through at length with Dave. I mean, the login stuff is a kind of, it's a development thing that we've improved. The performance was a really interesting one because what happened was we generally sell people more transcoders that they then put on individual bits of hardware. The way a lot of other vendors do it is they do concurrent encoding on a single piece of hardware, like the TechSmith model, where you can get 3 simultaneous transcodes or 7. The problem with that is it doesn't appear like you get a lot of performance gain because you're just maxing out that machine. So the test that we did, Dave booted up a load of instances on Amazon Web Services, and we did a lot of testing on it. We found really it was about 30 to 40% faster if you were just to have different machines doing it rather than one machine hammering at 7 files at one time. So again, it's a tricky one because you've either got to have some monstrous machine, which I know you do, or you've kind of got to go down the route of getting lots of machines to do the transcoding as a kind of a cluster. Disaster recovery and resilience. I mean, we have a load balanced solution in terms of MEDIAL, so you can get a load balanced MEDIAL. And then the backup, we do get this quite a lot in terms of a question. I mean, there's a database that's got to be backed up, so you've got to have a good version of SQL to do that. Because believe it or not, we have a lot of customers that run SQL Express, which is really difficult to back up the database. Ollie's smiling.
We don't.
Good. I think yours is on a cluster, actually.
It is, yeah.
Which is great. And then, media archives, you're looking at some solution to archive that content. And we've had vendors that wanted to work with us on that, saying, well, why don't you promote our solution? My only issue with that is all of those solutions are very expensive. I mean, I found them to be, I've asked and they've said, well, it's £50,000 just to get going. And realistically, whether people have got a budget to do that. I mean, we're talking about backing it up from the point of view of, let's say, doing it in a very clever way of like, okay, this content is used very, very infrequently. We'll put that on tape and we'll bring it into proper storage when it's requested. So a very intelligent way of kind of keeping stuff archived. But that stuff goes into your tens and tens of thousands, really. Backing up, I mean, so if you've got, so the stuff is on your SAN, presumably, the media, or is it a local drive?
Actually, it is on the SAN, but actually we're moving most of our storage out. I mean, what would be useful for us probably is to use one of our cloud storage providers.
Like AWS or?
I'm actually probably thinking even from a file level.
Yeah.
So, obviously we use Google, but we also use Box. We have unlimited storage there. Yeah. Sounds like a very nice bucket to be able to go and put stuff. And actually if we could use that as, if not, file storage to deliver from as archival, that would probably be quite useful. And that's probably what we would investigate internally, but it'd be quite nice, I think, from a product and support perspective to kind of understand whether actually, create a Google Drive account, specify the credentials, and what we'll do is we'll manage some stuff out to there.
I think the archive bit, I mean, Lee's here, who's one of our developers, is...
We're just doing some work at the moment on the Google API for some other parts of the V6, so it's quite familiar at the moment. So that probably would be something similar to that, where you can get into the Google Drive and transfer files.
So Lee's not got a mic, so we're probably not hearing this audio at home on the live stream. But basically what we're saying is we're doing a lot of work with the Google API at the moment in terms of the simulcasting of the live stream and also putting content from MEDIAL into YouTube, into the video manager. So there's not a huge leap from just storing stuff on there, if that's a cheaper way of storing content there.
References already to Google Drive.
Yeah.
In that API.
Would that be your preferred one, Google Drive, or is it others? You're not bothered?
I'm not sure that I'm too bothered. Box would be, a corporate standard for us, but I think that, probably if we asked everyone here, we'd get Box, Google Drive, OneDrive. They tend to work very well in terms of education, in terms of our licensing costs, and also tend to just be the market leaders anyway in terms of those cloud storage. I mean, I'm happy for anyone to shout different from the floor? Box, yeah. I mean, Box works well for us because of the governance side. You know, rather than just a big bucket, you know, we can move some of that, you know, the archival and retention policy in that direction. So
I think that's useful in terms of, I know I worked on a spec with Dave about archiving and retention, and if we could archive stuff off to something like that, that would be great. You know, just move it over, and if it's got this kind of governance seal of approval and trust mark and whatever, that's even better, because then it's an approved solution. And actually, interesting on Ryan's side, on the Wowser side of things, in terms of using things like S3 and Azure to kind of store the content, they've got this solution called Media Cache, which actually you can use to kind of cache content on those particular places. And we've done a couple of projects recently where we are using those platforms to cache content. I might be able to run through that a little bit later if we've got time, but the theory is effectively, if you had, let's say, London Met, you've got overseas campuses, haven't you? Have you got any in China or Hong Kong?
We have partner colleges.
China and Hong Kong, or
China, yeah.
Okay. So China's a really difficult one to deliver the content to. So to begin with, if you wanted to put a server in China, like a cache server, we could do a caching thing. It's very, very difficult to get those servers actually in China, because you need these special licenses, and there's this huge process that you have to go through. And us as a vendor, it's not something that we're going to do. You would almost have to do it yourself. And honestly, I've looked into it. I wouldn't bother. So what you could do there is you could set up a cache in somewhere like Singapore, Thailand, or Hong Kong would probably be even better for China. And Wowser can actually, on first request of the content, so first user in Hong Kong goes to MEDIAL here at London Met, and it pulls the content down to the cache. Every subsequent user is viewing it from the cache, which means that obviously the content's going to be much, much smoother, and it works really well. The only thing, and it's probably a question for Ryan, actually, I don't want to put him on the spot, but I know when we tried it, we can only get it working with kind of flat files, so we can't get it working as an adaptive experience. Is that true to say that it is only a kind of, you know, to an MP4 file, like a single rendition or whatever you would call it?
Yeah, I think with Media Cache, I mean, currently in its default state with our cloud vendors, it's compatible with S3, with Amazon, Google Drive, Microsoft Azure, and we're working with Alibaba as well. So specific to China, if you're doing stuff in China or have a facility there, Alibaba, they know the right people within the Chinese infrastructure to go through the firewall and create a local edge caches inside of China. I think from a functionality perspective, so Media Cache is mostly used for of course, caching all your VOD content. It should work seamlessly with adaptive bitrate. So I'd be interested to hear the feedback on the tech side of why that's potentially not working. In a live to VOD workflow where you're using MEDIAL and WOWs under the hood to live stream record all of your adaptive bitrates, your 3 or 5 or whatever renditions you have, we can save that all to S3 buckets, you know, and have them all available for reference after. Pull in the MP4s and then, of course, restream it to HLS or anything. So that's possible. So you can use it as a VOD cache, and you can also mount a bucket on the actual server itself as a source to live stream record too. So we always recommend record locally and then synchronize with any cloud storage, and then you can remove the local one so that server doesn't get overloaded or your SAN. Yeah. There's all these different workflows that you can do. But you know, we're expanding what we can do on the archival side. One of the other things I'll point out is what we're doing is you can record to MP4 as a VOD asset. We can also create the chunks, the HLS chunks, and persist those chunks in a dumb storage. So you can now have all those TS chunks for HLS just sit out there already chunked out, and then use that in any way you can, manipulate it, do all these things with it. That's a new method that a lot of people are using to archive, is already have it chunked out as HLS. The problem is if you do that and you don't record an MP4 and you keep that out there, what if in 10 years is a new standard? And you know, so we always recommend keep it in MP4. It's probably the best for archival. The final thing I'll just say, which is quite interesting and not something that we've developed with MEDIAL yet, but it's available inside of Wowser, is this, if you've used DVR, which is the ability to live pause, live rewind, we create this cache that you can create a 30-minute, 1 hour, 1 day cache of the live stream. All those files get saved to a local storage, and then you can actually use our REST API to create clips from different parts. So think of a live football game, you want to create a live replay of goal. You can do that with a DVR cache. And you can even create a user interface where you have a live editor to create small little MP4 files. I think what's interesting here for education, and probably a question I actually had for you, is micro-learning is people's attention spans are shorter and shorter. So sitting through a 45-minute lecture, if you can create clips out of that to either use for marketing or to use to actually summarize a longer lecture, that's a very interesting, I think, future-looking technology that can be developed with Wowza. Yeah. And I could talk to Rob about that in the future. I could see that being very interesting, because then you would archive it, but archive it only maybe the relevant parts of a lecture or parts that really students care about for a variety of reasons. I think that would be really good. What we're seeing is obviously not just the lecture recording where people are doing, effectively taking the notes of the lecture, so you can watch that back, but new content and short clips just to explain a concept, or particularly within science. What they're doing now is they've got the great facilities. They're saying, well, we're not just going to teach using that, we're going to use that to actually create some learning content and actually pre-record the experiment as well, so that if perchance doing it live doesn't work or something else, they've got a really nice, properly produced artifact that they can use and include within their blended learning materials. And just the ubiquity of having cameras everywhere, having the microphones, and having fairly decent setups everywhere means that we're not bringing people into a studio, which we can do, or spending loads of effort setting up expensive cameras and things like that. But I think what we're not getting is people making chapter marks and sharing those. It's not something that I'm really aware of, although it's a feature there. And I think that absolutely that kind of clip creation and sharing, the content out of the larger piece would be really great to see.
I think that it comes down to as well what I'm going to go through in V6 later with this kind of requirement to do closed captions, to actually capture from the video the speech, the words, or the text, whatever you want to call it, because at that point let's say you have to do it. I mean, you do now. I mean, I'll run through the reasons why people have to do it later. But you get to that point where you're then doing in-video search on the text. So you're saying, yeah, the interesting bit, that's the goal. Well, a goal is something you're having to look through the video to find, or you find a bit of speech where the guy went, goal, exclamation mark, maybe. But with a lecture, one of these lectures, if you can pick out a word, then you can go to that point in time as well. And this kind of speech to text technology hasn't really been up to the job of doing that. I'm not going to say until now, because that's a really bold statement, but I think the technology that I'll show you later is so vastly improved that now it's kind of almost ready for prime time. So the technology that I'll show later is kind of getting most of the way there, to the point at which you could edit your captions without it being incredibly laborious to do. And it's affordable enough that people can do it. So there's these two things where you can get great captions, but it's going to cost you over $100 an hour, easily. I mean, that's probably like the absolute minimum. Or you could get captions, speech to text, which is 85 to 90% accurate, and it might cost you a couple of dollars an hour. And then it's kind of this judgment call that people like Olly or the people that are paying for it have got to make. Well, $180 or $2? And then how long is it going to take to tidy those captions up? Probably not that long. Can we get somebody that's, not being paid huge, vast amounts of money to do that? It starts to become more economical. Is it acceptable to have 90%? I don't know whether it is. If you look at the wording of the ADA in the US, with it's 508, I think is the regulation there, it's not acceptable for it to be 90%, and not here either. We've got Equality Acts and things like that. But it kind of alludes to your point that in video search, you're going to get these chapter points just by virtue of the fact that there's certain words. I mean, it's not something that's in V6, but that is part of our roadmap going forward, because then there can be loads of video. Ollie could have 2-hour-long lectures, but the students can just go to the bit where they spoke about quantum physics, and that's it.
Yeah, just a very quick point on that. From the Wowza side, we are working with many technology vendors who are helping with the whole voice-to-text functionality. I also see a lot around machine learning. So the idea of not even the audio itself, but the video itself gets analyzed and creates metadata that's more easily searchable for MAMs or for searchability inside of an LCMS system. So there's a lot happening in the space to better improve the technology. And it's funny because this is in place and it's legally required in America, but very few are able to actually implement this because it's cost prohibitive, the technology is not ready. But we are working in this space with our technology vendors. So hopefully we'll see more in the coming years.
Got any other questions from the floor? No? Everyone wants to have their sandwiches. Is lunch ready, Dave? It's here. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring it in.
Okay, so I think we're going to go to an intermission online, and then, yeah, let's have some lunch. Okay.